Hi, welcome to the conditional statement session of the End Hour training video. In the previous video, we talked about the various data types that we have in PHP. In this video, we will look into the conditional statements in PHP and how they are used to solve several problems in programming in general. Now let's proceed with the steps. Conditional statements in PHP are used to perform different actions based on different stated conditions. In PHP, we have the following conditional statements. We have the if statement. We also have the if-else statement. We have the if-else, if-else. And lastly, we have the switch statement. Now, let's take a look at the if statement. The if statement in PHP executes some code if one condition is true. And the syntax for writing an if statement in PHP is as follows. We have the if keyword, then we open our braces. Inside our braces, we have the condition which will be stated inside. After that, we open our curly braces and we close our curly braces. Now, in between these two curly braces is going to be the block of codes which will be executed if the condition is met. Now, let's take a look at an example. In this example, we are checking if variable x is actually greater than y. If this evaluates to true, the block of code in between these curly braces will be processed. Let's save and take a look at our example on the web browser. Now let's refresh. You can see from the output that we have what we specified in between that block of code printed out on the browser. This is so because our condition actually evaluates to true. Now let's take a look at the if-else statement. The syntax for the if-else statement is as follows. We will have the condition inside our brackets and then the curly braces. In between these curly braces is going to be the code we want to execute if condition is true. Then we will have the else, then the curly braces. In between the else curly braces will be the code we want to execute if the condition is false. Now let's take a look at an example. In this example, I declared variable x and passed in the value 10. I also declared variable y and passed in the value 2. Now, I want to use the if-else statement to check which is greater between the two variables. Now, if y is greater than s evaluates to true, then on the browser, I want to print out greater is y. But if variable y greater than the variable x evaluates to false, on the screen, I want to print out greater is x, because that means that x is greater than y. Now, let's save and go to our web browser to view the yielded result. On the web browser, we can see that the value printed out on the else statement is what we have on the browser. Now, let's take a look at the syntax of the if-else statement. For the if-else statement, we will have the if, then open our brackets. Inside the bracket will be the condition. Then we'll open our curly braces. In between the curly braces will be the code we want to execute if the condition are true. Then we'll have the else if statement, and then open our brackets. Inside the bracket will be the condition we want to check for if the first condition evaluates to false. Then we'll open our curly braces. Inside these curly braces will be the code to execute if this second condition on the else if statement evaluates to true. And then lastly, we'll have our else, then the curly braces. In between the two curly braces will be the code to execute if all condition, the first condition in the if statement and the second condition in the else if statement, all evaluates to false. Now, let's take a look at an example. I'll declare variable x again and pass in the value 10, and also declare variable y and pass in the value 2. The first condition I want to check for is that if else is greater than the variable y, I want to print to the browser that greater is x. And then if that evaluates to false, I want it to check another condition, which will now check that if y is now greater than the variable x, I want it to print to the browser that greater is y. Else, if both conditions evaluate to false, then definitely I want to print to the browser that both x and y are equal. Now let's save and view the results on the browser. I still have greater is x because in our code we can see that variable x is actually greater than variable y. Now let's manipulate this to check out if our else if else is actually working. I'll modify the variable y to be 21. Let's save and view the result on the browser. Now you can see that our result actually changed. Now I'm having greater is y. Let's go back and test for another condition. What if I change variable y to 10? Let's save and view the results in the browser. Now we have both y and x are equal. Now we have seen our if-else statement in action. Let's now take a look at the switch statement. The switch statement in PHP is used to perform different actions based on different conditions. Now let's take a look at the syntax of the switch statement. We would have the switch, the variable, and then our curly braces. Inside the curly braces will be the cases we actually want to evaluate. Each case will have a label. In between the case would be the block of code we want to execute. This will be executed if the variable set in n is the same thing as the label. Then we'll have the break. The break will be used to break out of the switch. Then let's add an extra case. We can have as many cases as possible in our switch case method. We can have as many cases as possible in our switch statements. But at the end of it all, if none of the cases actually meets the variable set in n, then we will need to declare a default for our switch statement. Now, let me explain how the switch statement works. In the switch statement would be a variable. This variable will always be evaluated once. The mode of evaluation depends on the cases. If there exists any match between the value set in n and any label from the cases, then the block of codes for that particular case will be executed. If none exists, then the default value will be executed. Now, let's take a look at an example. I'll declare a variable fruit and call it orange. Now I want to check for fruits. If If the fruit is set as banana, then I want you to print to the screen that I am currently having a banana. Now, let me explain what we have here. I declared a variable fruit as orange. Then, I actually want to check the exact fruit that I have and display a particular result to the browser using the switch case. Now, let's explain what we have here. I declare a variable fruit as orange. Now, I want to check it against many conditions to print out a particular result to the browser. Here, I'm switching the fruits and then checking it against multiple conditions. The first case, if my fruit is banana, I want it to print to the screen that I have a banana. If it's not a banana, it will continue to the next case. For the next case, I want it to check against apple. If my fruit is apple, it's definitely going to print I have an apple to the browser. Likewise for the third case, if my fruit is orange, I want it to print I have an orange to the browser. If none of the condition is met by what I set inside my fruit, I want it to tell me that I don't have a fruit on the browser. Now, let's save and view our results in the browser. Because I actually set the variable s as orange, here, because I actually set the variable fruit as orange, the result I am having on my browser now is telling me that I have an orange. Now, let's go back to the code and change our conditions. Now, I want to change my fruit to carrots. Let's see what we have on the browser. Now, let's go back to our browser. Let's refresh. In this session, we talked about conditional statements. We discussed the if statement, also the if-else statement. We also look at the if-else-if statement. and then we looked at the switch statement. In the next module, we will be considering loops and how they are being used in PHP.